The chalkboard sign outside Hart's Meats was a work of art. Leo Hart, with a calligrapher's patience, had sketched a perfect T-bone steak, shaded it with 3 different colors of chalk, and in his clean, looping script, written, "Hart's dry-aged ribeye, the king of steaks." Your grandfather's grandfather agreed. It was a statement of permanence, of legacy. The shop itself, nestled on the corner of Maple and Oak in the quaint town of Cedar Creek, was a living museum. Its windows were spotless, its white-tiled floor worn to a soft gray in the paths trod by generations of customers. The air hummed with the quiet, respectful chill of the refrigerated cases and sang with the scent of sawdust, salt, and something deeper, richer, the smell of time and tradition. This was Leo's kingdom. He was the 5th-generation Hart to stand behind that scarred oak counter, his large, capable hands a mirror of his father's and his grandfather's before him. At 32, he wore the mantle of his name with a quiet, solemn pride. Across the street, a different kind of statement was being made. A young woman with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes that held the fierce green of a summer storm was taping a poster to a lamppost. The poster showed a graphic, black-and-white photo of a crowded chicken barn, next to a vibrant, full-color image of a rescued cow grazing in a field of clover. In bold, impactful letters, it read, "Compassion is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Go vegan. Cedar Creek Animal Rights Alliance." Her name was Elara Vance. Where Leo was solid oak and bedrock, Elara was wildfire and conviction. She had moved to Cedar Creek 2 years ago, bringing her activism from the city to a place she believed needed a wake-up call. She ran a small, thriving online store selling handmade vegan soaps and candles, but her true passion was the alliance. She believed in a world without suffering, a world where the very concept of Leo Hart's shop was a relic of a cruel, outdated past. Leo saw her taping the poster and sighed, the sound a low rumble in his chest. This was becoming a weekly ritual. He respected passion, but he saw her activism as a personal attack on his family, his craft, his entire way of life. Elara finished with the poster, stepped back to admire her work, and her gaze drifted across the street. It landed directly on Leo, who was standing in his doorway, arms crossed over his broad chest, a white apron tied neatly at his waist. Their eyes met. It wasn't a friendly glance. It was a clash of tectonic plates. She crossed the street, her canvas sneakers silent on the warm asphalt. "Leo." "Elara." He nodded, his voice a low baritone. "New poster." "It's a powerful message," she said, her chin tilting up. "Maybe you should take a long look. Understand the consequence of your craft." "My craft," he said, the words measured, "feeds families. It celebrates birthdays and anniversaries. That ribeye in the window? It's from a heritage breed cow raised by Old Man Henderson, who names all his animals and gives them a better life than most pets. There's no cruelty in that case. There's respect." "Respect?" Elara's laugh was short, sharp. "Is that what you call it when you end a life for a 10-minute meal? There's no respectful way to do that, Leo. Only a final one." A small crowd was beginning to gather, sensing the familiar theater of their feud. "This shop," Leo said, his voice rising slightly, enough to carry, "has been here since 1919. We've fed this town through wars and depressions. We know our farmers, we know our meat. This isn't some factory-farmed horror story. This is local. This is community." "Community shouldn't be built on the backs of the suffering," Elara shot back, her voice clear and ringing. "Your community is their slaughterhouse. I'm just giving them a voice." The tension was a live wire between them. Leo's jaw was tight. Elara's hands were clenched at her sides. They were a study in contrasts. Him, the immovable object of tradition, her, the unstoppable force of change. The town watched, as it always did, taking sides in a silent, unspoken referendum. The feud was public knowledge, the weekly showdown on Oak Street. But neither of them could have predicted how it was about to be turned on its head. The catalyst arrived in the form of a glossy flyer delivered to every mailbox in Cedar Creek. It was for the town's 50th annual Harvest Fair, and it announced a new, headline event, the Cedar Creek Culinary Clash. The tagline made Leo's blood run cold and sent a jolt of fury through Elara. A battle for Cedar Creek soul. Leo Hart versus Elara Vance. Meat versus vegan. Tradition versus tomorrow. Who will win the palate of our town? Leo crumpled the flyer in his fist. He stormed into the mayor's office, the paper a ball in his hand. Mayor Evans, what is this? I didn't agree to this. Mayor Evans, a portly man who loved spectacle almost as much as he loved re-election, beamed. Now, Leo, see it as an opportunity. A bit of friendly competition. It'll be the talk of the fair. You'll each prepare a signature dish for a panel of 3 judges. The town will love it. Elara was already there, her expression thunderous. This is trivializing a serious ethical issue. This isn't a game. My thoughts exactly, Leo said, surprising himself by agreeing with her. Too late, the mayor chirped. The posters are printed, the announcements are made. The clash is on. Unless, of course, you're both afraid the other might actually win. It was a cheap taunt, but it worked. Pride, that most dangerous of human follies, flared in both of them. Fine, Elara said, her voice icy. I'll do it. I'll show this town that a plant-based dish can be more decadent, more satisfying, than anything that comes from a carcass. Leo's eyes narrowed. And I'll show them why Hart's Meats has been in business for a century. But we do this my way. No pre-prepared nonsense. We cook, live, in the community kitchen at the fairgrounds. Let people see the real work. Agreed, Elara snapped. I have nothing to hide. They left the mayor's office together, a vortex of simmering anger, not looking at each other. The public feud had just been given a stage, a date, and a ticking clock. A week before the fair, disaster struck Elara. The industrial kitchen she'd rented in the next town over for recipe testing had a flood. All her equipment, her test ingredients, her notes, everything was a soggy, ruined mess. Panic clawed at her throat. She had no place to practice. Mrs. Higgins, the sweet, elderly librarian who was the de facto secretary for every town committee, heard about the dilemma. With the meddlesome wisdom of a woman who had seen every romance and rivalry Cedar Creek had to offer, she made a phone call. Leo, she said, her voice crackling down the line. It's about the clash. Elara's lost her kitchen. It's a shame. Wouldn't be a fair fight if she couldn't practice, would it? Your shop's kitchen is commercial grade. And it's empty after 6. Leo was about to refuse. The idea of Elara Vance, with her protest posters and her judgmental eyes, in his sanctuary, was sacrilege. But then he thought of what his father would have said. A heart is always gracious. A heart helps his community, even if that community member was trying to put him out of business. Gritting his teeth, he called her. Elara was equally horrified when he offered. Your kitchen? The Cleabator next door? Absolutely not. Suit yourself, Leo said, a part of him relieved. Forfeit, then. I'll tell the mayor you backed out. There was a long, tense silence on the line. He could almost hear her weighing her principles against her pride. Pride won. Fine, she bit out. Tonight, 8 o'clock. And I'm bringing my own pans. That evening, the bell above Hart's Meats door jingled, a sound usually associated with friendly customers, not sworn enemies. Elara walked in, carrying a box of her own cookware and a bag of groceries that smelled distinctly of herbs and spices, not of meat. The shop was different at night. Quiet. The display cases were empty and clean, the lights dim. The massive, stainless steel kitchen in the back, usually a hub of butchery and preparation, was silent and gleaming. Ground rules, Leo said, pointing a stern finger. That's my station. This one. He gestured to an identical, spotless stainless steel counter on the opposite side, is yours. You don't touch my tools, I don't touch your tofu. We clean up after ourselves. Understood. Crystal, Elara said, setting her box down with a thud. For an hour, the only sounds were the hiss of her sauté pan, the hum of the industrial hood, and the rhythmic, precise thwack of Leo's cleaver as he broke down a side of lamb for the next day's business. It was a tense, silent dance. He tried not to watch her, but he was a craftsman, and he was curious. Her movements were quick, efficient. She julienned a bell pepper with a speed that rivaled his own knife skills. She was making a sauce, a rich, red reduction that filled the air with the scent of smoked paprika, roasted garlic, and something else he couldn't place. The silence was broken when she cursed under her breath. Damn it. He looked over. She was staring into a pot, her face a mask of frustration. Her sauce, which had been thickening beautifully, had suddenly broken, the oil separating and leaving a greasy, unappetizing film on the surface. What's wrong? The question was out of his mouth before he could stop it. It's nothing, she snapped, but the defeat in her voice was palpable. My umami base. I spent hours on it. It's ruined. Leo wiped his hands on his apron and walked over. He looked into the pot. Instinct, the instinct of a cook who understood emulsions and fats and the chemistry of food, took over. You added the cold mushroom stock too fast to the hot oil. You shocked it. I know what I did, she said, but there was less heat in her words now, just exhaustion. Without asking, he took a whisk from her counter and a small bowl. He separated a teaspoon of her sauce, added a single drop of hot water, and whisked it furiously. It came back together. He did it again, slowly, patiently, incorporating the broken sauce back into the emulsion. Slowly, he murmured, more to himself than to her. You have to coax it, not force it. Elara watched, mesmerized despite herself. His large, powerful hands she had only ever seen wielding a butcher's steel, were moving with a surprising, delicate precision. In minutes, the sauce was silky and unified again. She stared at him, her anger warring with a grudging gratitude. Thank you. He nodded, stepping back to his station as if he'd done nothing more remarkable than point her towards the salt. A broken sauce is a tragedy, no matter what's in it. It was the first civil word they had ever exchanged. The secret kitchen sessions became a routine. An unspoken, fiercely unacknowledged truce settled over the stainless steel battlefield from 8 to 10 each night. The public feud continued unabated. They would pass each other on the street with a glare, or exchange barbed comments in the grocery store for an audience. But in the quiet of the kitchen, a different story began to unfold. It started with technical questions. What's the best way to get a sear on a king oyster mushroom to make it taste meaty? Elara asked one evening, her voice hesitant. Leo looked up from the pork loin he was deboning. High heat. Cast iron. Don't move it. Let it caramelize. Just like a steak. She tried it. The sizzle was magnificent, the smell deeply savory. It worked. Another night, Leo was struggling with a sausage recipe. He was trying to create a healthier, lower-fat option, but the result was dry and crumbly. He muttered a curse. What's the problem? Elara asked, not looking up from her lentil pate. Fat content, he grumbled. It's too lean. It's like eating sawdust. You need a binder, she said, her tone clinical. Something that retains moisture. Try soaked flaxseed. Ground into a meal. Mix it with a little water. It makes a gel. We use it all the time. He was skeptical. Flaxseed? In a Hart family sausage? But the next night he tried it. The result was juicier, with a better texture. He didn't thank her, but he didn't have to. The quality of the sausage was thanks enough. They began to talk. Not about ethics or activism, but about food. About the importance of sourcing. He learned that she foraged for wild mushrooms in the woods outside town and got her heirloom tomatoes from the same elderly farmer, Old Man Henderson, that he got his beef from. She learned that his family century-old shop was a millstone of debt and expectation around his neck, that he lay awake at night worrying about declining sales and the rise of supermarket chains. One evening, she was working on a vegan cheese, made from cashews and fermented with probiotics. It was a tricky, temperamental process. Leo finished his work and, instead of leaving, he pulled up a stool and watched her. Why this? He asked, his voice quiet in the humming silence. Why such elaborate replicas? Why not just eat vegetables? Elara paused, her hands stilling. She looked at him, and for the first time, the defensive wall in her eyes was down. It's not about replication. It's about proving a point. That a compassionate choice doesn't mean a life of deprivation. It can be rich. It can be decadent. It can be everything people love about their favorite foods without the cost. The cost you don't see in your display case. He considered this. My grandfather used to say we use every part of the animal. Nose to tail. It's a sign of respect. To waste it would be the true sin. I can respect that, she said softly, surprising herself. It's the industrial system I fight. The one that treats living beings like widgets. Not a farmer who knows his animals by name. It was a monumental concession. The air in the room shifted. The rivalry was still there, the fundamental disagreement was still a chasm between them, but a bridge of mutual respect was being built, one late-night conversation at a time. The night before the culinary clash, a storm rolled into Cedar Creek. It was a violent, late summer squall that knocked out power lines. The lights in Hart's meats flickered, buzzed, and died. They were in the middle of their final practice sessions. Elara was cryo-blanching herbs in liquid nitrogen for a dramatic garnish, and Leo was finishing a delicate bacon-wrapped something. Great, Elara muttered in the sudden, profound darkness. The only light came from the occasional flash of lightning outside, illuminating the kitchen in stark, blue-white bursts. The backup generator will kick in for the freezers, Leo said, his voice a calm anchor in the dark. Can't lose the inventory. But the main lights are out for a while. He moved through the familiar darkness with ease, finding a drawer and pulling out a box of long-stemmed candles. He lit a few, their warm, dancing glow pushing back the oppressive blackness, creating a small, intimate island of light in the vast kitchen. In the flickering candlelight, everything felt different. The stainless steel looked softer. The shadows hid the sharp edges of their disagreements. They sat on stools at the central island, a bottle of whiskey Leo had produced from his office sitting between them. To a fair fight tomorrow, he said, pouring 2 fingers into a pair of tumblers. To a fair fight, she echoed, clinking her glass against his. The whiskey was smooth and smoky, warming her from the inside out. They talked for hours. Not about food, but about themselves. Elara talked about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about how her love for animals was the one constant in a chaotic childhood, about how it felt to finally find a cause that gave her life purpose. Leo talked about the pressure of being the last heart in the line, about his father's early death, about the loneliness of being the keeper of a flame that fewer and fewer people seemed to value. You know, he said, staring into the amber depths of his glass, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just walk away. To not be the butcher of Cedar Creek for just one day. And sometimes I wonder, she whispered, if anyone would listen to me if I wasn't always so angry. Their eyes met across the candlelit island. The air crackled, not with animosity, but with something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. He saw the fierce, vulnerable woman beneath the activist's armor. She saw the burdened, gentle man beneath the butcher's apron. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the cool steel counter. His touch was warm, rough, real. She didn't pull away. She turned her hand, her fingers lacing with his. It was the turning point. The silent, sizzling kitchen rivalry had just caught flame. The day of the harvest fair dawned bright and clear. The town green was a riot of color and sound. Bunting fluttered, children shrieked with laughter, the scent of popcorn and candy apples filled the air. In the center of it all was the main stage, transformed into the culinary clash kitchen. The crowd was the largest anyone had ever seen for a fair event. The entire town seemed to be there, divided into Team Leo and Team Elara, waving signs and cheering. Leo and Elara stood in their respective kitchen stations, separated by a few feet of stage that felt like a mile. They hadn't spoken since the night before. The memory of his hand in hers was a brand on her skin. The look in her eyes in the candlelight was all he could see. Mayor Evans took the microphone. Cedar Creek. Welcome to the culinary clash. Our contenders have 2 hours to create their signature dish. Let the battle begin. The clock started. They moved with a focused, frantic energy. Leo was preparing a century steak, a perfect, dry-aged ribeye, reverse seared and finished with a compound butter made with bone marrow and fresh thyme, served alongside duck fat roasted potatoes and a red wine demi-glace that had been reducing for 2 days. It was a masterpiece of tradition, a love letter to his heritage. Elara was creating the future feast. A centerpiece of a whole, roasted cauliflower, brined and smoked to mimic a prime rib, glazed with a sticky, savory sweet pomegranate and tamarind glaze. It was served with a wild mushroom and lentil Wellington and the cashew-based fermented cheese she had perfected in his kitchen. It was a bold, beautiful, and entirely plant-based declaration. The crowd oohed and awed. The sizzle of Leo's steak hitting the cast-iron pan was met with a roar. The dramatic unveiling of Elara's golden brown, glistening cauliflower received an equally enthusiastic cheer. But as they cooked, their eyes kept meeting across the stage. A glance filled with the memory of candlelight and whispered secrets. The public performance felt hollow, a pantomime of a feud that had, in the quiet of a stormy night, been utterly transformed. The 2 hours flew by. They placed their finished dishes before the 3 judges, Mayor Evans, the stern but fair food critic from the regional newspaper, and Mrs. Higgins, whose palate was as sharp as her wit. The judges tasted Leo's steak. They closed their eyes in bliss. Perfection, Leo, the critic said. The very soul of meat. They tasted Elara's Wellington. Their eyes widened. Incredible texture, Mrs. Higgins said. The depth of flavor is astonishing. It came down to the final verdict. The town held its breath. Mayor Evans stood, clearing his throat dramatically. Judges, we have our decision. This was, without a doubt, the most difficult choice in the history of this fair. Both dishes were exemplary. Both chefs are a credit to Cedar Creek. He paused, milking the moment. Leo's heart was hammering against his ribs. Elara felt faint. However, the mayor continued, a winner must be chosen. And by a single point, the winner of the Cedar Creek culinary clashes, Elara Vance. The crowd erupted. Elara's supporters went wild. She stood, stunned, as a wreath of laurels was placed on her head. She had won. She had proven her point. She looked across at Leo, expecting to see defeat, anger, resentment. But she saw none of those things. He was looking at her with a quiet, profound pride. And then he began to clap. Slowly at first, then with more force. The butcher, applauding the vegan activist who had just beaten him at his own game. The crowd, taking his cue, gave her a roaring, respectful ovation. The spectacle was over. The crowd dispersed, buzzing with the shocking result. As dusk settled over the fairgrounds, Leo was packing his knives. Elara approached him, the laurel wreath still in her hair. You should have won, she said softly. Your steak it was art. He shook his head. No. Your food was brave. It was new. It made people think. Mine just made them remember. He gave her a small, tired smile. The town needed that. Leo, she started, but her voice failed her. The kitchen, he said. Tonight. 8 o'clock. I have something for you. At 8 o'clock, the bell over Hart's Meats jingled. The shop was lit by the same candles from the night before. The display cases were not empty. But they were different. There were no steaks, no chops, no sausages. Instead, one case was filled with an astonishing array of plant-based charcuterie. There were rustic tranches made of lentils and walnuts, thinly sliced prosciutto, made from marinated melon, rounds of the fermented cashew cheese Elara had taught him to make. The other case held a single item, a perfect, miniature version of her future feast Wellington. Leo stood in the middle of the shop, having changed out of his bloody apron into a clean one. He looked nervous. What is this? Elara whispered, her eyes wide. It's a partnership, Leo said, his voice rough with emotion. If you'll have it. The world is changing, Elara. I can either fight it or I can adapt. My skill isn't just in butchery. It's in understanding flavor, texture, presentation. It's in serving my community. And my community, part of it wants what you have to offer. He gestured to the transformed cases. Hart's Meats can be more. It can be Hart's Provisions. The place for the best of both worlds. The best local, ethically raised meat. and the best local, passionately crafted vegan food. Under one roof. A place where our town doesn't have to be divided. Tears welled in Elara's eyes. This was more than a victory. It was a revolution. It was a bridge. And, he added, stepping closer, it's an apology. And a question. He took her hand. The feud is over. But would you be willing to start something else with me? Something real? She looked at their joined hands, then at his hopeful, earnest face. She saw the future in his eyes, a future not of conflict, but of collaboration. A future they could carve out, together. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes to it all. She leaned in, and in the candlelit silence of the shop that was no longer just a butcher's, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the tantalizing promise of the future, the vegan activist kissed the butcher. And it was sizzling. 1 year later, the chalkboard sign outside Hart's Provisions was a work of art. Elara, with an artist's flair, had drawn a beautiful, intricate design that intertwined a sheaf of wheat with a butcher's hook. The script, a blend of Leo's clean loops and her own flowing style, read, Hart's Provisions. EST 1919, reimagined 2024. Featuring our legendary dry-aged ribeye and Elara's award-winning future feast Wellington. All are welcome. The shop was more bustling than ever. Customers came for Leo's steaks and stayed to try Elara's newest vegan creation. They came for her vegan cheeses and ended up buying a heritage breed pork chop for their partner. The town, once divided, found common ground over a shared love of good food. And in the back, in the stainless steel kitchen that had once been a battlefield, Leo and Elara worked side by side, their rivalry long since melted into a partnership that was the most satisfying recipe either of them had ever created.